Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, you can do better than that, Baltimore. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is April Yvonne Garrett, and I have a really husky voice today because I'm a little sick. But I am so excited to see you here this morning. Thank you so much for coming out. I'm going to make one little request. What do you think that request is going to be? That's good. So that's the first request. Cell phones, beepers, pagers, 8-tracks, cassettes. If you could turn them off, put them on vibrate. I don't care if you tweet, that would be a really good thing. What's our hashtag? It's Amplify Baltimore. So if you want to tweet, that would be great. My second request, who knows the second request? Yes, move up. Come, be closer with your people. You guys know really. I really appreciate it if you could move up. That would be lovely. So good morning.
Good morning.
I am overjoyed, elated. Couldn't get any sleep last night, as you can see by the bags under my eyes, to be here today for what we're starting, which is a movement. You guys feel like this is a movement?
Yeah.
That's good. So I'm going to do something kind of impromptu-ish and ask a couple of people that I know in the audience to tell me why they're here. So I'm going to start with my sister's ex-boyfriend who wrote a check. I love people who write checks, by the way. His name is Morgan Wheeler, and he lives in, is that New Northwood? Yeah, New Northwood, which is where I grew up. So Morgan, why don't you stand up and tell them why you're here, besides the fact that you love me. Why are you here?
Well, I'm here because I want to support you, of course, and but I feel that Baltimore really needs to start, the community in general needs to take steps to ensure that we're more engaged politically and in the process. I'm feeling more and more that people are disengaged from the political process. And I spent time in Europe and some other countries, and I got a sense that the people, the citizenry, were much more engaged in controlling their own destiny. And I don't really see that here, like I did when I traveled. So I'm really hoping that this could be the beginning of something where people become engaged and take more control of their destiny. So I want to be a part of it, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to pick on somebody else who I know, a friend of mine surprised me today, who I went to high school with. She doesn't know I'm about to pick on her. Shelly. Hi, dear. We did high school student government together, so we have a connection to the deep kind of civic and engaged roots of Baltimore. And she surprised me by being here today, so Shelly, why are you here?
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm here because in the wonderful way that things happen now, I heard something on the news, and then I went and looked it up on the web, and then I saw what April is doing, and I really respect it, and I came out to be a part of it. But also, I'm someone who's been a local crafts person and community development person for 20 years, and my goal right now is to help train the youth in what we do. So I just saw a good synergy there of people talking about amplifying it, what we can do here and how we want to do it.
I think the last person I'm going to go to is the person whose office I went to beg him to help me get this space. And I went in with a little righteous indignation and said, you know, I'm just really tired of people punking Baltimore, and we need to do something about it. And he said, okay, I get that, let's go. And that would be Jake Oliver from the Afro. Jake, why are you here?
I'm here because I can't tell you no. But I'm also
I wish I could find a husband to do that, but okay,
also because, like you, I share a concern about what direction the city's going to go, not only just on political, but on all levels. And I think that something like this is overdue, primarily because of the fact that if, in fact, we don't get together and start talking about what it is that we think we ought to be doing, we will end up doing nothing. And we all end up reaping all the negatives as a result of that. So I'm here because of the fact that I hope and I'm expecting this to be a very important energizing point into the future of Baltimore City.
That's awesome. Thank you. So what I'm really excited about as a former kind of teacher is that the information that we're putting out is getting around and that people really understand why they're here. I mean, I fielded a lot of comments and questions about what we're trying to do, and folks really were having a hard time wrapping their brains around it, and they didn't understand what we were up to. And I wrote a piece called Why We Amplify Baltimore. When you get a chance, I hope you take a look at it and read it. It's sort of an interesting love letter to the city, because in the work that I do through Civic Frame and communities around the country, people are so interested in Baltimore. But the perspective that people have of our city, I think, is skewed. And it's skewed because of how we see ourselves and how we language ourselves. And I think that it's in our own hands, each and every one of us in this room, the communities of influence that we have, where we have influence in our jobs and our daily walk. It's in our hands to really change that paradigm, for people to stop thinking about Baltimore as a city that bleeds and start to think about Baltimore as a city that leads. I see so much power and potential in everyone in this room. When I was driving over here this morning, besides going, please Lord, let this snow stop, I saw an Asian businessman on York Road in Woodburn at my favorite lake trout place, preparing for his day, and there was an elderly African-American man walking down the street with his dog, and I saw them interacting and saw the love that they had for each other as community. I saw people jogging in Bolton Hill. I saw a city awake in the snow. I saw a city alive. I saw a city engaged. And I saw people committed to being a part of the citizenry of what I think is the greatest city on the earth. And it's not just because I'm a native. It's because it really is a great place with amazing people and their incredible opportunities and power here. So I wanted to start this conversation with letting you know that it's an honor for me to host and hold this space for you, but I do not do it alone. This movement is not a movement without other people who host in it. We have a ton of ambassadors from different segments of this city who have signed on to this effort, who are talking about these initiatives and these issues within their communities. They're hairdressers and electricians and car mechanics and techies and entrepreneurs of all stripes and politicians. All of these people who really have different ways they even see for solutions, but knowing that at the end of the day, the common ground is making Baltimore better. But the most important thing that you need to know is that this does not happen without people writing checks. I am not getting paid money to do this. Let me state that again. I'm not getting paid the money to do this. This is an effort of folks who are really coming together to say, these are important conversations to hold. Let's pull our resources together. So there are folks who have written checks, and there are folks who have given us in-kind services, and I wanted to acknowledge them now. First, Associated Black Charities, Diane Bell McCoy will not be here today. She's having car trouble and sends her regards. Second, and near and dear to my heart, the President's Roundtable wrote a check for this event. And I just want you all to know how important it is for me to be an African-American daughter of this city and have that organization and Associated Black Charities support this first event. And their new president, Ms. Beckett, is here, Maria Beckett. I want you to stand so we can acknowledge your contribution, and thank you so much. We also received a check from Respira Medical. The next panel will be moderated by Yolanda Maria Welch. If you do not know this woman, you need to know this woman, so look up her company. She's extraordinary in every way, and hopefully you'll see her later. Individual donors include Eric Bryant, Conan and the Supreme Dream Team from 92Q, Mike Galeazzo, who has been a stand for Amplify Baltimore since its inception, and Morgan Wheeler, as I said, family member. In-kind donations, David Troy and Nate Luke, who, if you don't know them, again, you need to. Anybody familiar with TEDx, these are the guys behind TEDx, but they do incredible things within the community. Next week, they're going to be doing Create Baltimore. You should look that up. It's going to be here as well. Thank you guys for broadcasting this live. Innovative Design Enterprises, Integrated Designs, who did all the branding. Mass Transit Administration, Joe Green, a dear friend of mine from high school, did the cool t-shirts and all the tchotchkes were given to panelists. Thank you so much for always being a stand for me and Civic Frame. The Maryland Institute College of Art for granting us this space, and the Park Heights Community Health Alliance for making these programs for you guys. So got to thank people where they're coming in. Now we have a special treat. Where are the folks from the Walbrook Project? Hi. Do you want to come up and talk about your video real quick? Is it cute? Is it cute? Are you guys ready for us? Okay, she's going to talk.
Good morning. How's everyone? Good. Again, I want to thank April Garrett and Civic Frame for putting on Amplify Baltimore. I think it's a really wonderful initiative, so I'm definitely excited about the direction that it's going in. And I thank you all for being here today, and it's wonderful to see all these people who care about Baltimore. My name is Felicia Pride, and I run an organization called Backlist. And we do creative projects as well as content-based projects that connect media, entertainment, and education. One of our projects is called the Walbrook Project, and it's actually a recipient of the Ignition Grant that was granted by Ignite Baltimore, which is coming up. I don't know if many of you are familiar with Ignite Baltimore, yes? Okay, well that's coming up, I think it's March 10th. It's at the Walters Art Gallery, so check it out. But they gave us a grant to arm 11 teens with flip cams in the Walbrook community to do film projects. So these teens are going to go out into their community and develop films about the strengths and challenges of their neighborhoods. So they started working with their cameras this week, so we thought it would be a good opportunity to get them on camera to respond to the 3 different conversations that are going on today. April invited us to have youth voices as a part of this conversation. Because we started this week, it is what we would consider rough footage, but it is an opportunity to hear from young people what they think, their thoughts, their perspectives, and also I want it to be an opportunity to encourage all of us to consider to include youth voices in the conversations that we have about the future of Baltimore, because they will be our leaders. So this first one is about them responding on who we are and where are we going.
Like I listen to my grandmother, and she'd talk about how young people change Baltimore, how Baltimore used to be, and how some of the landscapes were, where some stores have been, and how the people would everybody just about knew everybody, but now it's like young people who changed Baltimore, like the stores they had are gone, and it's much more isolated. Everybody doesn't talk to everybody, you can't trust everybody, but that's Baltimore for you.
Since I haven't been here that long, I'm new to Baltimore, but as far as I am concerned, that I think Baltimore is a pretty nice place, and it's welcoming, and it feels like you're at home. It gives you a homey feeling in certain parts of Baltimore. Like in some parts you feel welcome and like you're surrounded by family members and friends that'll help you out, and others you feel insecure and unsafe because of the reputation that it has.
I definitely like the art scene, because I'm an artist. The food there, the type of food that you can eat, there's some places you can go to. You can go to Sonny's, Mike's, Jimmy's, all the Chinese food spots. We can go get there's like some places you can get a good Philly cheesesteak at. And then there's always the staple of living in Baltimore has always been a chicken box with salt, pepper, ketchup, and had to have on the side. So,
I mean, I like about Baltimore, like the people that I have to meet in Baltimore and the environments. But the environments that become good, they turn bad.
The people of Baltimore, well, they have personalities. So it's just that sometimes where they live at or the things that happen to them, it changes them, and it kind of makes life kind of terrible for them, because it leads them down dark paths that nobody really wants to go. It leads them into drug dealership, doing drugs or crimes, just either A, to survive, or just to have some purpose to it.
I think Baltimore educationally is a very advanced place because there's a lot of schools that offer very much and have the interests of kids and teenagers my age, and like there's schools that are known just for here that have the best academic scores ever, and I think that'll be a lot not for just students in this area but me as a student.
If we help each other to try to better ourselves, we can be in a good place in the near future where we can have more people here, more respectable young people. We would have more jobs, better schools, and a better city overall.
And that's why we do this work. So it brings me great pleasure. As you can see, my husky voice will not allow me to moderate 3 panels today. So at late notice, I engaged 3 dear friends who are going to step in at the gap. There are a lot of other people who are going to step in. Joe Green was one of them, and I really appreciate you, Joe, for that. But we got a treat for you today. If you don't know Lester Spence from Hopkins, you're about to learn a lot about a really talented, gifted, thoughtful, intellectual who is our gift to Baltimore, definitely a gift to Hopkins, and I think you're going to be hearing more and more about him. Lester Spence is the assistant professor of political science at Johns Hopkins University, and he'll be moderating today. Our panelists, I'm going to let him introduce the panelists and do his thing, but I just wanted to thank him again for, on Wednesday, on his way to a show, agreeing to do this, because that's an extraordinary gift to this movement. So enjoy the first panel. Gotta love an entrance.
How's everybody doing? How's everybody doing? That's what I'm talking about. My name is Lester Spence. I've been adopted by Baltimore, but I'm from Detroit. One of the reasons that I like Baltimore is because, for reasons both, the reasons that are complicated, Baltimore reminds me of Detroit, but on the East Coast. So the reason the way I articulated it, somebody asked me from home how I like Baltimore, wow, it's just like home, but it's on the East Coast. Now there's a lot richer than that. There's a lot more stuff going on. But I think that to the extent that our challenge as urban residents, our challenge as citizens of the United States, is to figure out what the future is going to look like in the city, the way we begin to figure that out is in places like Baltimore and Detroit. So I look at this as part of a series of first steps to answer the critical question, what does the 21st century city look like? What role should it have? So on that note, we have a really powerful panel, and what I want to do is I want to ask each of our panelists first to introduce themselves briefly, then after they introduce themselves briefly, to answer a couple of critical questions. Then we're going to have a little bit of dialogue, and then we're going to open it up, because in a panel discussion, I really want to emphasize the discussion part of the panel discussion. Oh, I told the 2 sisters in the back that I asked them to come up. They didn't have to comply, but then they told me that they were the first people here, so I said I'd give them a shout out. This is your shout out. Okay, we'll start with Seaman. So the question I have is the question that is part of the title for the panel. Who are we? And then what I'll do is I'll actually ask a question after that segues into the where are we going. So who are we? It's 3 to 5 minutes. Start with Seaman.
Good morning, and thank you, April, for this invitation. My name is Seema Iyer, and I have been Division Chief for Research and Strategic Planning for the City of Baltimore for the past 5 years. And in the past 5 years, there has not been a dull moment. I'm originally from Philadelphia, so I also feel adopted here by Baltimore. So who are we? I think the story of Baltimore, there was a story that kind of resonated in a negative way from 1960s to 2000. And I think we know that story. People leaving, people fleeing, in some cases fleeing in the middle of the night, which we're going to hear about a little bit. But that story has certainly changed in the last 10 years. And all of us are, or me in particular, hopefully all of you, are kind of waiting for the data to corroborate what we're hearing on the ground. You know, we've seen a regeneration of housing. We've seen a regeneration of businesses. The last 2 years, of course, have been difficult for the entire nation. But the 2010 census, which is about to come out next month, hopefully will show that we have stabilized as a city, that it's not bleeding, as April had said, and that we are changing demographically. One of the things that we do know for the state as a whole is that Maryland is now the 6th most diverse state in the nation. And I think that is portending for a 21st century city, that we do need to be much more diverse, welcoming to a whole new set of foreign-born people here in Baltimore City in particular. And I think the biggest change we're going to see, obviously, is a growth in the Hispanic population. I myself, of course, am of Asian descent. There's a large Asian population in the metropolitan region, not necessarily in the city, and I think that that's obviously a huge opportunity to try and make sure that the city is truly a 21st century diverse city. We have that kind of at the cusp, and hopefully either the data will show it, and we will move forward in a way to make sure that this does remain a diverse city.
Thank you.
My name is Antero Pietla. I came from Finland, basically, in 1969. I had spent a year in graduate school in Illinois, but I came to Baltimore for one specific purpose, to join the staff of the Baltimore Sun. I had big dreams, and many of those dreams were realized. But in 1969, I came to a city that was largely demoralized. It had just gone through a very traumatic period during the riots that followed the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. Many other cities were affected by the same type of destruction. And so in 1969, I found a city that was demoralized, but at the same time, there were people like you, who had a vision about a better future that would come. One of the first assignments I remember was I went to cover a kite festival in Druid Hill Park, where I met 3 or 4 couples who turned out to be all activists in the Citizens Planning and Housing Association, all couples like Jay Brody and Paula Rome and Connie and Caswell Kaplan, who were doers in this city. So basically, what I'm saying is that you are starting something that has lots of potential, particularly in this city, particularly in a city with this history. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the history. 100 years ago, in 1910, Baltimore became the first city in the United States to require by a city council ordinance that each residential block be segregated. And this particular law was copied by about 30 other cities, mostly in the old Confederacy. And so this Baltimore Act is the kicking off point of lots of segregation measures that then followed. Restrictive covenants, redlining in the mid-1930s, and then blockbusting and predatory lending, which are coupled. I talk about all of those things in my book, and I wrote the book because after having worked at the Sun for 35 years, after having written countless of articles trying to analyze this city, there were lots of things that I did not understand. things that nobody seemed to be able to explain, and I decided, let me do it and let me write this book. Since writing that book, I've been trying to make up for the lost time, and I've been particularly captivated by the technical revolution that we are witnessing. In fact, I'm fully convinced of this, we are at a crucial turning point in the whole history of humankind. The children who are born today, if they are born to technically have families, will have a totally different type of brain functioning system than we do, or will have children who are born to technical, don't have families. From the very beginning, their approach to problem solving is going to be totally different. They will be taught to be looking for apps. So from the very beginning, they are not going to be talking about problems, but outsourcing problem solving. And so I don't know what the census figures are going to tell us. They are going to tell us about some very, very interesting changes that will depict America and Baltimore at the time when the census was taken. Now, is the census going to be a good predictor of future trends? I doubt it. In fact, I think that far more than any census figure, the figure that you need to keep in mind is the following. By 2013, just 3 years from now, there will be more smartphones than PCs in the world, 1.82 billion smartphones against 1.78 billion PCs. And this is change. At a moment like this, I'm happy that to have the BlackBerry-loving Barack Obama in the White House instead of John McCain, who said that he did not know how to operate computers. So what can we do with smartphones if they are becoming such a determinant in our lives? At the Consumer Electronics Show that is still going on in Las Vegas, General Motors introduced an electric one-person commuting vehicle that parks itself and returns to you when you summon it to your smartphone. This is change. And this change threatens to dispatch Microsoft and Intel to the dustbin of history. Change on this scale also invites a backlash. I regard the Tea Party movement as a reaction to this change. It's religious and anti-intellectual, a bit more enlightened than the mullahs in Iran. That's my take. But in a curious way, I think the Tea Party is speeding up the change that is all around us, the change whose uncertainties were rejected by millions and produced a Tea Party movement in the first place. In state after state, governments are reconstituting themselves, forced to do so in the same way that the private corporations have done. So we are in a society, we live in a cities where all the old assumptions are disappearing. And so I think that a movement like yours will have a great future in that you are born at this very moment. In a city with its segregation past, you are not limited to regular type of meetings. You are connecting through computers in efforts to analyze what's happening in this city and to solve the problems. And I thank you.
Thank you very much. Arliss.
Good morning. I'm Eris Melisaratis, former Secretary of Business and Economic Development for the state of Maryland, currently serving as Senior Advisor to the President for Johns Hopkins University. And I've founded something called the Eris Institute, which is an attempt at a think tank that brings together some of the old traditional voices and some of the newer, more futuristic voices. And let me start off by telling you that I have a bright vision for Baltimore, that I think we are a city of great heritage, a city born of the technology breakthroughs of the era. We're a city born of the strength of the Port of Baltimore, and largely due to our location next to the world's capital in Washington, we have thrived. With every new technology, we have been there, we've taken the next step. As much as I'm a believer in technology, I've got to take issue that our future interconnectivity does not need to be purely by computer and by technology, as my colleague just asserted, but rather we need to fall back on the people-to-people connection. The future growth is going to be on people understanding people, people helping people succeed, people helping people meet maximum human potential. Baltimore is a diverse city, and we've overcome the histories of segregation and the like. Now, we need to perfect this cultural mosaic that is America, and I believe that Baltimore has as much of a shot at doing that as any other city in the world. We still have the port, which provides jobs at the entry level in distribution. We have a growing hospitality industry that provides jobs. We have a growing technology industry. And even though we don't have the large mega factories that employed 35 and 40,000 people at one time, like the Bethlehem Steels and the Western Electrics and the GMs, we have a great number of small businesses that are thriving on technology and that will offer job creation. Jobs are important because I think we need to integrate the economic, the social, the political, the cultural, and then the spiritual, and bringing people together to succeed as a group. And we need to take pride in the fact that certain spots in the city are becoming bright lights of development and redevelopment. But we cannot forget the neighborhoods in between. We cannot allow ourselves to have any boarded up houses. Every edifice needs to be usable. You can't have homeless people when you got 20, 30,000 boarded up houses. You got to find some way to fix them. So I urge leaders, elected leaders, and neighborhood leaders, community leaders, to get together and build on our positives and look to what is possible, because everything can be done if we had a vision that we're going to succeed as a whole. Baltimore has incredible potential. Our research institutions are second to none in the world, between Johns Hopkins, which employs 40-some thousand people, and the University of Maryland complex. That's a huge, huge power base where technology starts and emanates, and where we can build companies and the jobs of the future. We need to retrain and provide our people opportunities. So training people for the jobs of the future is very, very important. And pulling together these elected and non-elected leaders to share a common vision to make this city great once again, to fulfill the American dream, which is blending diverse cultures from all over the planet to create the very best society known to man. And that era is not over, folks. People are coming over in droves from countries whose names we never heard of before. It's no longer the Western Europeans or the Eastern Europeans. It's people from Asia and Africa that are coming here because this is the best country on earth. I came here from Greece in 1956. And the city has made dramatic progress since then. We've rebuilt major portions of it. And that's extremely important. We need to take pride in that and have a vision of how we can rebuild every other neighborhood and have everybody share. This is a country, and Baltimore certainly is one of the typical cities, urban areas in this great country, where anybody from any country, any nation can come and say this is the best country in the world, without leaving kind of a heartache that you're leaving your homeland behind. Because indeed America and our cultural mosaic that thrives in our cities and should thrive even more is the fact that we've got diversity built by people wanting to come here and join up. That's the strength of this nation. That must be the strength of the city. We need to build around that with our cultural institutions, our research institutions, our academic institutions, our education system. Value education. Grow every child, give every child hope that they can grow to be a leader. The election of President Obama was a key turning point in the evolution of this nation. The fact that we could elect an African-American president, if you look at our history, was certainly a fulfillment of the Founding Fathers' dream. And that's something to build on. That's something to give every child the opportunity that there's hope to maximize their potential. There's no reason if you start out working at McDonald's scrubbing floors, that if you buy in on the company motto, if you buy in on the values, that you can't target to be chairman of McDonald's someday, or chairman of Walmart, or whatever the institution is. This land gives you hope. And I think our job as leaders, or as aspiring leaders, or just as community members, is to give everybody hope. Not to dwell on the negatives, recognize the positives, build on the positives, and give everybody hope that we can get involved and make this a better place.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Gary Cole. I am the Deputy Director of the Baltimore City Department of Planning. Like my colleagues, I have a great deal of respect for the citizens and the 600 plus communities of Baltimore. And when I think about Baltimore, who we are communities, south, east, west, rich communities, some haves and some have-nots. We are constantly reinventing ourselves. As the gentleman stated, we have one of the most tremendous attractions on the East Coast, and that is the Inner Harbor. It's unbelievable. People from all over the world are constantly calling us and wanting to come to the Inner Harbor and asking us, you know, how is it so successful, and why is it so successful? But Baltimore is more than the Inner Harbor. Baltimore is a collection of communities and neighborhoods. People are constantly creating new ways, innovations, ways to improve their neighborhoods. And part of my challenge at the planning department is to help create systems where all communities can enjoy community development, economic development. And one of the things that I'm going to focus on later on is the effort that is underway at the Department of Planning. It's the rewriting of the city's zoning code. It's called Transform Baltimore. And the rewriting of the zoning code is so important because it all deals with land uses and the coming together of business and creating an atmosphere where neighborhoods are preserved, but at the same time it's friendly to businesses and it allows all interests to be satisfied, and it allows the city to grow, to prosper, to create jobs, economic opportunity for all. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Otis Rowley. I am the former Director of Planning for the City of Baltimore and former Chief of Staff for the City of Baltimore, and I'm currently a Senior Manager for the Urban Policy Development Group. We're a public sector consulting firm where we try to find broken city agencies throughout the country, and we try to fix them. Dr. Spence's question of who are we is a challenging one. It's challenging because of Baltimore's rich diversity. But for me, to answer that question, when I think of who are we, I think, well, we're African American, we're Caribbean, we're African, we're Italian, we're German, we are Asian, we're Latino. When I think of who are we, I think we're 249 residential neighborhoods and 935 community associations, which is an answer of who we are as well, because 249 neighborhoods and 935 community associations says we have some work to do. But that's who we are, because we're Baltimore. When you ask, okay, well, who are we? We're religious. We like to drink. We have because the only thing that outnumbers the liquor stores are the churches and temples and mosques.
We like to drink and pray at the same time.
So, who are we? When you ask that question of who are we as Baltimoreans, I say, we're educated. We have the best 11 phenomenal educational, higher educational institutions, but we're also educated in terms of the school of hard knocks. Who are we? We're hard workers. We're brilliant in that regard. We have been scrappy and struggling and strong, whether we had a PhD from one of those great institutions or from the streets. Who are we is a large community in a town that is a city. We are Baltimore, and who we are is a people. We are a people who have had to deal with institutionalized racism, from vanguard laws that created segregation, to an environment that allowed for a school system to miseducate our kids for a long time, to failures in terms of decisions that we made at the community level and at the government level, in regards to addressing the lack of jobs and opportunity. We are a port city and have thrived and succeeded from that port, and have grown from our very inception from that port. But also because we are a port city, we have been a distribution point for heroin for a very long time. And we have to deal with that reality of who we are. So for me, the question of who we are is a tough one. As everyone's been talking, I've been pondering how I was going to respond. But when I think of who we are in terms of Baltimore, we are strong. And we are strong enough and smart enough to learn from the past, what we did right and wrong, and smart enough and strong enough to be prepared for what I think will be a phenomenal future.
Thank you. I actually had a segue question before I got to where are we going, but I realized as you guys were talking that we actually have an interesting opportunity. So one of the challenges with events like this is that we usually have an age distribution that's kind of skewed. That is to say that the youngest people on the panel are usually like middle-aged. We very rarely have a panel where we have seniors and kids, or something close to kids. And of course, this panel is no different, even though we have a diverse panel in other ways. But the thing is we started this panel with a presentation from the Walbrook Project, right? Where we actually had high school students kind of talking about where we are. Now, the project is rough, and granted, because of a whole array of reasons, high school-age kids aren't necessarily trained to be able to give rich and complex answers to questions like these. But I was wondering if you might take a few minutes to respond to what you saw in the Walbrook Project, or even if you didn't see anything there, just to think about what this discussion, how you might talk about who we are to someone who is basically about to graduate from high school in the middle of a challenging economy.
I was actually very surprised how positive the responses were from the teenagers. And that's a good thing, because I think maybe even a few years ago that those answers might not have been so positive. Just this idea that it's a great place to live and there's having a great education, that's fantastic. And that positive attitude is going to carry them so much farther than believing that they're not getting a great education. So I was very excited about the fact that it's positive. I think that's probably a different response than would have happened maybe 10 years ago from the children in Baltimore City, and I think that's testimony to the great things that have been going on in the last decade.
Let me pick up on a very positive statement that Seema made, that we've made some dramatic improvements in our education system in Baltimore City the last few years. And if that, in fact, is being reflected by the positive view of some of the kids that we saw in the Walbrook Project, congratulations to us. We need to keep building on that. Again, I think that we need to give every young child hope that no matter the changes in this country, that they will be able to succeed here. Absolutely. And that they need to participate. And they don't need necessarily to go become PhDs and become a Nobel Prize laureate. But if they, as I believe April said in her introduction, became electricians or mechanics or hairdressers, as long as they become a working part of society, a contributing member of society, as long as they do their share, and as long as they contribute to the success of others, we're going to be fine. So I think that we, whatever generation we are, beyond the kids in our pre-K through 12 system, we need to give each of those kids hope that they can participate in the American dream.
I was completely blown away because several years ago, Walbrook was having all types of problems. There was talk about the state taking over the schools, closing it down, and as you saw today, what the young people were saying about Walbrook and the type of education they were getting. I don't know if you recall, but several years back, HBO did a special on Douglas High School, and they painted a completely different picture about what was happening in high schools in Baltimore City and with our youth. However, I applaud the Walbrook Project, and I applaud the kids because this is what is needed, and this is what we'd like to see going forward in all of our schools.
I wasn't, as the youngest member of the panel, I wasn't surprised.
Oh, come on.
I take great pride in that today, especially since often people saying, well, you're a kid, you don't get it. And as I'm getting older, I enjoyed being called the youngest member of the panel. So let me say this though. I was not surprised though by what I heard, because the reality of Baltimore, even when we have had to deal with our toughest times, our kids have had that level of positivity. And some of the hardest hit schools and some of the hardest hit neighborhoods, and those of us who work and interact with a lot of young people have seen that level of positivity and hope in our community and in our neighborhoods. I am very much pleased with the progress that we've made, and I think some of what you heard reflected that. But you would have heard that same thing even in the height of the kind of the drug wars in Baltimore, even in the height of our deepest and darkest problems. The issue is not the level of positivity of our youth. It is tapping into that positivity and then harnessing it in a real way so that you can translate that positivity into action, whether that action is more education, whether that action or is jobs. It is taking the hope that they have and not squashing it. And that's where I think, kind of generations after them, those of us who have been older than them have failed them. There is more opportunity now, though, I think, than ever before, and that's what's exciting about this time of history, I think, in Baltimore. With our colleges and universities, with I think the transformation that we're starting to make in terms of our schools, and I think that's what got me about what I heard was that, okay, they're still there. They still have that idealism and that hope. They still see what is positive about Baltimore, even if some of the older members of our citizenry don't necessarily see it. And so our challenge, and all of our challenges, is tapping into that and making it long-term and institutionalizing that hope and that idealism, and for it not to be held only by those under the age of 40.
So what I want to do is, I want to take this last part, where we're going, but I really want to situate it in part of a larger tapestry and connect it to the idea of the future of the city that I talked about earlier. I want you to, so when I'd like to ask, so what is the future of the city, right, the city, and then what role does Baltimore play in that? So that's kind of another way to tackle the where are we going question.
I think there was a survey done, I'm not sure who the institution was, and talking about satisfaction with the city of Baltimore. There's a general question about your thoughts about the city of Baltimore. And I forget what the absolute number was, but they separated out people that had been in Baltimore for less than 10 years and people that had been in Baltimore for more than 10 years. And the people that had been in Baltimore for less than 10 years had a dramatically more positive attitude towards Baltimore than the people that had been here longer. So I think that's another thing that we need to tap into as a city, that when you come here and you don't have the shackles of the past that have really weighed down this city, this is a great city. And to know that somebody who's new here is not going to know about, you know, all the dirty laundry that might be going on here in the city, maybe it truly has passed in some ways, that's something that we should tap into. But the other thing that I think, going off what Otis said about tapping into the youth's hope, I don't believe that we should continue, and this is obviously my own personal opinion, to keep saying that America is the greatest country. Not because I don't believe it, but because it's almost like we're brainwashing ourselves into saying that we're the greatest country and we have nothing to learn from other countries. And we have a lot to learn from other countries. If you go to the other Asian tiger, and this is what I think that the youth should know, that there's things to learn from other people, there's things to bring back to Baltimore. If you go to some of the Asian tiger countries that received a lot of development funds in the last 20 years, they are off the charts in terms of technology. You go to a place like Singapore, you go to a place like Japan, you go to a place like Hong Kong, you feel like you're on an IT highway as soon as you get off the plane. Now, that's something that I think that we should all be cross-fertilizing, you know, bring that to Baltimore. Let's bring that here. Let's move us into the 21st century. Let's not keep saying that this is the greatest country in a brainwashing kind of way. Let's say, like, look, the world is the greatest planet in the galaxy, and let's try and figure out how we can tap into it.
I personally am very optimistic about Baltimore, certain parts of Baltimore. One of the parts I'm very optimistic about is this geographic region from the Inner Harbor to Station North, to Charles Village, to Remington, and so on. This is happening, and it's becoming a reality very quickly. And I'm glad that there is some thinking along these lines in trying to find strategies that would open up Baltimore, make the city more welcoming. For instance, in the spring, a group of students from this very institution, from MICA, will have an exhibit on devices that are being used to make cities, particularly Baltimore, more welcoming or less welcoming. It talks about all the kinds of devices like one-way streets, segregative measures, and so on. That's one thing. Now, I am not as optimistic about many of our row house neighborhoods. They have some inherent problems in terms of construction and maintenance, delayed maintenance. And there is another thing that is going to be very, very difficult for an old city like Baltimore to handle in the future. And that is the fact that with the increased technical smartphone revolution, if you will, people won't have the kinds of do-it-yourself skills that are typical among many of today's people. Meanwhile, in order for you to repair some of the row houses, you're going to be having difficulty in hiring people who can do certain things. Now, sheetrocking is easy. Plastering, you cannot find a plastering at affordable rates in the city of Baltimore. There have been attempts in the past to deal with Baltimore's row house problem. One of the dreams was by a man who was a big builder in his time. He is still with us, but he is not as often in the newspapers as he used to be. His name was Willard Hackerman. And he looked at row houses and he said, oh, that's easy. I'll just take the roof off and I lower with cranes a prefabricated unit that modernizes the row house. Well, very quickly he realized that no Baltimore row house is identical to any one else. I mean, if you have 18, it's not 18 feet or 23 feet. It's 22 and a half or something else. So the bottom line was that his prefabricated modernization units did not work. And so I'm glad that there is lots of renovation being is happening in various neighborhoods. But the fact is that particularly many of the traditional row house neighborhoods in West Baltimore have a very aging population, and unless they can be rejuvenated somehow, they will not have any bright future.
Okay, Spence, as I recall, the question was, what is the future of the city, and therefore what may Baltimore's role be in that? Let me go back to the contrast that I saw when I came here as a young kid, 13. We got off in America, and I didn't see any people on the streets. It seems like American cities were not metropolitan like Europe was. I was used to watching people on the streets. Well, since then, I believe we've gone through a lot of turmoil, a lot of riots, a lot of tearing down, but I believe every American city has rebuilt itself, has recreated a downtown core, has put in people attractions like our Inner Harbor, has rebuilt itself. And I see the American city as becoming more cosmopolitan, more metropolitan, like some of our European counterparts. I do agree that when you step off a plane in Singapore or China or anywhere, Shanghai in particular, you see this amazing growth of new technology. We are burdened here by our success of the past. We have legacy systems that are hard to overcome. I've actually written a book on this topic of technology and America's role in the 21st century global economy. And besides the emphasis on innovation and education, I talk about making this country look young again, rebuilding our infrastructure, our roads and bridges, putting in the next kind of infrastructure that is easier to put in Shanghai than it is to put in Detroit. So we need to take that and make it part of our vision for the future. How do we rebuild a nation, rebuild a city? How do we become a more public transportation-oriented society? Because only 1 or 2 American cities may have a world-class public transit system. We're happy not to be one of them, unfortunately. One of my visions was that if we're going to grow as a city, we probably should connect the Washington Metro with a new, redesigned, rebuilt Baltimore Metro system and make this one urban area. That way, you have job opportunities. You have opportunities to rebuild neighborhoods, as difficult as it might be. They are rebuildable. It's doable. And I agree when you talk about this section of the city, the Station North, Remington, Mount Royal areas, because we've created a lot of value by rebuilding the Boston Street corridor and Federal Hill. And the sections of the city that you mentioned, the northwest quadrant, has so much more architectural value already there. You know, the houses are wider. They're 3 stories. They have architectural features that are worth preserving more than the 12-foot row houses that we preserved off of Boston Street. So there's a lot more to be done, but I think Baltimore has led the way in showing American cities how to rebuild themselves with a vision for the Inner Harbor.
As planning director, I televised the planning commission hearings. They happen in the afternoon. It can be frustrating if you work or in school, et cetera. And so we wanted to open it up. Now, for some people, you know, they would turn to, I think it was TV 25, and they would think it was kind of boring. For other people, they saw the relevance and blah, blah, blah. But that was one small way of starting to open up transparency in terms of where decisions are being made around residential, commercial, and industrial development throughout the city of Baltimore. So how do you take that to scale? There is technology at play now where you can stream these things live in terms of city council hearings, the Board of Estimates, the Board of Municipal Zoning and Appeals. All these things could be streamed live relatively cheaply. You can be transparent in terms of opening up access to data and legislating that you do that. The city of San Francisco, the mayor did an executive order, and then the city council also chimed in and actually did passed a law requiring data to be shared. Anything non-confidential data that has to do with city services and what's happening. We have to, kind of pull the curtain back so you can see the whiz is really only about 4.9, and that, that this is your information that you're paying for. These are your activities. These are decisions relevant to your life. I think another way in terms of transparency right now, the Board of Estimates has a mini meeting where decisions are made, and then a formal meeting that's open to the public that's kind of perfunctory. You eliminate the mini meeting, and you have the decisions being made in front of the people, so people hear and understand and know what's going on. That's transparency. That's open and access information, open access to government. And to the youth question, I'll be very brief, is the young man asked the question, well, how do we get the youth, make sure that they have ability to be more involved? And I think it is being more involved. It's around organizing. In 07, the last mayor's race, only 90,000 people voted in a city where you have 296,000 registered voters. So you get more involved by getting more involved. You're going to city council hearings, you're going to planning commission hearings, you take over. There has been no kind of social movement, no progressive social movement in this country where the youth were not actively engaged and actively part of it. And I think if we're going to transform Baltimore, no pun intended, but if we're going to transform Baltimore and amplify Baltimore, it has to be throughout the spectrum in terms of young, middle-aged, and elderly citizens being involved. And it is around organizing, I think, in a real way, in a substantive way, and picking issues. And rallying around those issues that are going to be attractive to your group.
Just to follow up on the transparency, the Department of Planning in recent years have made some advancements. As Otis said, the televising of the Planning Commission meetings. We also have on our website the Planning Commission agendas. Also, we have the actual staff reports that staff prepared on the various items. Also, we have a wealth of information on our website. For instance, we have all of our what we call strategic neighborhood action plans, small area plans. We have all of the urban renewal plans. So you can go to the website and you can see the plans that were prepared, and all of them are collaborative efforts with the city agencies, with the communities, with the stakeholders, and as we continue to become more transparent, we plan to make more and more information readily available to the citizenry of Baltimore City.
Let me talk about race. As I said, I came from Finland in 1969. Finland, 4.5 million people, no blacks living in Finland in those days, 1,500 Jewish families. Everybody in Finland was the same except for hair color and eye color. I come to the United States, I see this diversity, and that experience, in fact, then triggered my book decades later. But soon after I came to Baltimore in '69, the year after riots, I suddenly realized that I was starting to adopt the racial attitudes of my white peer group. Mm-hmm. I realized that I was in a city that at that time was 47% black. I did not have a single African American friend. So what do? You have to address this problem, if it is important to you, as it should, by doing things that correct the situation. I started developing African American friendships. And what I'm saying is that you can do it personally, but you also can do it, and you must do it institutionally. I mean the institutions in this town are very, very segregated. And I go to lots of, I used to go to lots of meetings, and it was pathetic how underrepresented African Americans were in many of these civic and public meetings. So there is no easy answer to this question, but you have to work on it.
Gee, I thought I was the one being challenged on that issue. I'm glad it was you. But I did come close to saying what you said, because I mentioned that the election of an African-American president allowed this nation to almost reach the dream of the Founding Fathers. Now, that's one man. That doesn't cover all of the multitudes that feel they're not participating. And I think that Otis touched on the answer here. The answer is involvement. Get involved. If you don't like what's going on, get involved. Get elected. Go to meetings. Participate. How did Barack make it? Community organizer. It's easy to be a community organizer. Go to the meetings. Find out who's calling the shots. Find out who has something to bring to the party. But be knowledgeable and demand of your elected officials that they understand the issues of every one of these 900-some community organizations, because that's how the message gets carried up. And I think we let people, once they get elected, kind of forget where they came from. And I think one of the challenges of elected leadership, or civic leadership at any level, is to get the message out and to connect. Not that you just build on one success, not to be parochial to your cause or your issue, but to relate that cause and issue and the success of your objective there to every other issue that is somewhat relevant, tangentially, or right in the center of the sweet spot. So it's getting everybody involved. Don't feel forgotten. Don't feel that there's no opportunity out there. If you get involved, you can make it. And if you can't make it here, you can't make it anywhere, folks.
I think that's an excellent way to conclude the panel. Thank you, guys. Thank you guys for participating. It's just the beginning. So April's going to come and make a couple of announcements. The panelists are going to kind of hang out, so if you have questions that were not answered, please feel free to ask them. And remember, this next panel from 1 to 3, I believe, is about political literacy. The question that we didn't quite grapple with is the subject of the next panel. So for those of you who are interested in this issue, and I think that's the critical issue, please use that as an opportunity to interrogate some of the ideas we discussed here. Thank you.
How was that? I have days in my life where I'm like, God is amazing. And today is one of those days. There are a couple of people who couldn't make this panel. Diane Bell McCoy, who had car troubles, and Dr. Clifford, who has worse than I have right now. And so I wanted to acknowledge that they were supposed to participate. And I'm a womanist feminist, so you know I would have more sisters on this panel. But Seema, you did us beautifully. I'm honored by everyone who gave of their valuable time on this snowy Saturday morning to be on this panel. Once again, Lester Spence, thank you for being a brilliant moderator. Tara Patella, who wrote an incredible book. If you have not read Not in My Neighborhood, go to the bookstore today, get the book. It is brilliant. Eris Melissa, who has become a great mentor, a great friend, a wealth of information about Baltimore and the region, and a crown jewel for the state of Maryland. I'm so grateful to know you and to have your support. Gary Cole, who I gotta tell you, Gary asked me some tough questions about this whole series and was a great ally and interrogator and only made this work better, and it will continue to get better for the next couple of quarters, so thank you, Gary. Otis Rowley, who is, of course, to be reckoned with on many levels, who did a great job as, were you the youngest urban planner, like, ever? I always have to give him crap because I'm 40 now and I'm old. So I'm no longer the youngest person either, so that's great. And Seema Iyer, who I had the honor of being one of...
I'm only 29.
That's right. Please hold on to it. I had the honor of being one of Maryland's leading women with, and you can see why we're really happy to have her and blessed to have her in the planning department. Just so grateful. So for all of the folks who are watching us on live stream, we thank you for your questions and your comments and your queries. We're going to be on live stream again all afternoon. It's live stream / Amplify Baltimore. If you have questions I will make sure that these folks and their brilliant minds are continuously available to you. Send them to Amplify Baltimore at civicframe.org. We'll be creating a resource page after every conversation so that information can be disseminated about the various questions that you've had. If you don't see your question answered, email me and I'll get back to you and make sure that it's posted on our site. Were you inspired to become an active agent of change by this panel? Yeah? Okay. That's really what this is about. So it's listening to these people, it's listening to your peers in the audience, it's taking it in, it's solidifying it, it's allowing you to sit back in your homes and your communities to continue these conversations with the people that you care about and the people that you love, but also that you take that to the next level and become active agents of change in your communities. I wanted to thank one of our sponsors who came in the back, Conan Ellerby from 92Q. Love 92Q. Thank you for being a good friend and a supporter of Civic Frame and Amplify Baltimore. Thank you for writing checks. I like people who write checks. I love people who write checks. And I really love people who write checks. Checks are good. Checks are feeding you. So again, thank Associated Black Charities and the President's Roundtable for your grub today. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the reason why I stand here and have breath and have life. My mom, who is here and will be here all day. For all of you who are my Facebook friends, you know that I'm crazy about my mom and my grandmother, and none of this work would be possible without their love and their support, but they really are at the center of what I do. I have a couple of board members over here, Russell Clark, who has been a member of the board of directors for Civic Frame and has been a stan. He's also a strong Baltimore City College man. I had to get that in there. You know how city people are. But guess what? We're about to have lunch. So I hope you enjoy lunch. I hope you enjoy meeting each other. Do you love how diverse this room is right now? Yes. Do you love that? I'm so excited about it. Again, honored that you're here. Come back, send people back, tell them to come here. If not, watch us on live stream. Thanks again. Take care.
All right. I don't know, man. I'm going to keep the book.
Put the panel with you.
We get the mug.